What's the scariest predator under the ocean? The crocodile? Huh, I don't think so. Loch Ness Monster? Please, it never existed. How about the kronosaurus? Well, it is extinct, but you might be onto something. Let's take a look at what it'd be like if these creatures were still around today. First things first, what on earth was it? The kronosaurus was a marine carnivore that lived in the cool, high-latitude Eromanga Sea. It covered vast areas of inland Australia between 90 and 120 million years ago, during the early Cretaceous period. Near-complete fossils of the creature were also found near Colombia, which is a country that has a noted connection to prehistoric reptiles and turtles. This fact makes it extremely possible that the monster I'm about to describe existed worldwide. You might have heard saurus and thought, oh, it's a dinosaur. But these were actually reptiles. They were the largest member of the Plesiosauridae family, referred to as plesiosaurs. Fossil evidence suggests they weighed over 20,000 pounds and were roughly 30 feet in length. Just to put that in perspective, the longest crocodile ever measured was a saltwater crocodile by the name of Lolong from the Philippines. It was 20 feet in length and weighed just under 2,500 pounds. And that's still 10 feet shorter and incredibly lighter than the average kronosaurus, making the crocodile seem like nothing more than a glorified goldfish in comparison. Despite its terrifying length, the most physically daunting feature of the kronosaurus was its head. Its skull was about 8 feet long, which was actually proportionally large given the size of its body length. Anything that was unfortunate enough to end up inside the kronosaurus's mouth may have been given false hope. After all, the teeth of the beast weren't actually that sharp. On second thought, I take that back. I wouldn't feel confident around a toothless snake, let alone being inside the mouth of this monster. But it's true that the kronosaurus's teeth weren't sharp, especially when compared to other carnivorous reptiles, such as crocodiles and alligators. The teeth of this prehistoric sea creature were instead conical. This means that they were cone-like in shape. Unfortunately, this lack of sharpness didn't make them less dangerous. The teeth were enormous and could be up to 12 inches long from the crown tips to the bottom of the roots. This obviously meant that the kronosaurus had an extremely powerful bite. It was estimated to be up to 30,000 newtons, which is almost twice as powerful as the bite of a large saltwater crocodile. Because of the bluntness of their teeth, they weren't suited for twisting their prey once in their grasp, but the size and shape of the teeth made them perfect for simple open and shut biting. They would have had no problem crushing hard objects such as the toughest of shells any sea turtle could offer. Just like crocodiles, the kronosaurus is believed to have had a short neck. This may have been an adaptation to allow the beast to successfully catch small evasive animals. Their body, in general, was fusiform and streamlined. This means it was narrowed at both ends and had very little resistance to the flow of water. The kronosaurus was also equipped with 4 paddle-like limbs. The hind limbs were larger than the front ones. They could span approximately 7 feet in diameter. All in all, this set the kronosaurus up to effortlessly propel itself through the waters and be an ultimate predator. Predator X, if you will? That's the name that was given to the fossil of a creature discovered near Svalbard, a Norwegian island group, in 2009. The fossil was identified as a 50-foot-long, 100,000-pound monster with a bite force of 33,000 pounds per square inch. This might be the highest bite force of any known animal. Although Predator X is yet to be classified as any specific type of animal, it was definitely a plesiosaur like the kronosaurus. And even if it wasn't Predator X, the kronosaurus was still most definitely a ferocious titan when it roamed Earth's oceans. The kronosaurus actually got its name from the Greek mythological figure of Cronus, the father of Zeus. Cronus was viewed as a titan from a generation of super powerful beings. So what was it that the kronosaurus, this terrifying monster, actually feasted on to satisfy its appetite? This creature was known to eat sea turtles, squid, and other larger marine reptiles of that time, such as elasmosaurids and ichthyosaurs. This suggests that if crocodiles existed in the realms of the kronosaurus, they too might have turned into lunch for the beast. There's evidence from the fossil remains of the kronosaurus that suggests that they also feasted on sharks, which I know is a disappointment to those of you who view that beast as the king of the ocean. Not when the kronosaurus was around, my friend. In any case, grounding all kinds of food into small pieces to help digest them would have been difficult without small teeth. This explains the presence of rounded stones found in many of the remains of these sea creatures. Researchers believe these stones may have been swallowed to control buoyancy or to help process food. It's also entirely possible they were accidentally swallowed while feeding on other animals from the seafloor. As if the kronosaurus even needed to be a meanie with its already existing power and size, there's also evidence to suggest that it indeed might have been. It turns out that after using all its impressive attributes to catch its dinner, the kronosaurus first liked to play with its food, like a cat does with a mouse. I guess since the hunt was so easy for them, they needed to get their fun from somewhere else. Well, I think now you should have a good idea about these creatures. So let's ask ourselves what it would be like if they were still around today. And by the way, why aren't they? Well, the kronosaurus was completely finished off by the same KT meteor that took out the dinosaurs 66 million years ago. But even before this catastrophic event, they were coming under increased pressure from an even bigger and more vicious family of carnivorous marine reptiles known as mosasaurs. You can't always be a top dog, I guess, or rather, top marine reptile. But what if this never happened, and they were still roaming Earth? Well, this might be obvious, but can you imagine what kind of impact that would have on sea tourism? Based on the impact that famous movies about sharks and killer whales had, what do you think the presence of a kronosaurus in the ocean would do to beaches? The very creature that would eat sharks and whales for breakfast. Beaches would certainly become a great place to go for a quiet walk, because nobody else would even be there. And what about such activities as boating, surfing, and scuba diving? You think anyone would dare try them, knowing that this 30-foot beast could be lurking beneath them? Let's give humans some credit and assume most of them wouldn't. This would cripple the global sea tourism industry, which is responsible for earning roughly $143 billion every year. Just to make sure this shocking point hits home, the most expensive yacht to ever roam the ocean was called the History Supreme. Its master bedroom was believed to have a statue made of T-Rex's bone and a wall made of meteorite rocks, as well as a 24-karat gold panoramic wall aquarium. Anyway, this yacht was worth nearly $5 billion, meaning you could buy 38 of them with the money lost in potential damages to sea tourism caused by the kronosaurus. I'm sure that the yacht's owner was happy the beast never made an appearance in their luxurious aquarium. So luxurious, in fact, that some people believe the History Supreme, reportedly owned by some business genius from Malaysia, never even existed. Rumor has it that it was simply an elaborate hoax fabricated by the supposed designer. Anyway, I don't think the trouble would just stop there. People could actually be in serious danger, regardless of being near the ocean or not. No, I'm not about to tell you that this thing would grow legs, adapt to living on land, and start picking us off one by one. At least, I hope not. I'm just going to point out the damage that the kronosaurus would inflict through its devastating impact on sea trade. In America, ocean transit accounts for 76% of national trade. On top of this, more than 100 vital pharmaceutical products originate in the sea. I'll also state the obvious and point out that the ocean is a huge food source for us humans. The presence of the kronosaurus could have a great impact on our relationship with the ocean, something we usually take for granted.
Tonight, the biggest and fiercest shark in history will face the blue, a mysterious creature from the ocean depths. The fight takes place far out at sea, so people are not in danger. But if Megalodon loses, the life of all mankind may be at risk. But first, let's get to know our opponents better. Megalodon was an ancient marine predator, a giant shark feared by all aquatic life for millions of years. Megalodon had no competitors in the oceans. It was at the top of the food chain. Current sea inhabitants don't even realize how lucky they are because this monster went extinct about 3 million years ago. Although people can't know for sure if it's really gone. The ocean is only 5% explored. It's possible that somewhere in the depths, Megalodon still terrifies all the fish. And today, the colossal shark will fight against a worthy opponent, the bloop. Technically, that's just the name of the sound that oceanographers recorded in 1997. The creature that made it could be called a sea monster, a kraken, a beast from the deep. No one knows how it looks, but we can guess its size. This ultra-low frequency bloop was so powerful that it could be heard by special sensors 3,000 miles away. If you were in New York, you could listen to the sound from Los Angeles. But the sound was deep underwater, where the audibility is actually much worse. A creature that can make such a sound could be dozens of times bigger than a blue whale, the largest animal living in the world. Interestingly, the source of the sound is located near the most remote place on Earth, Point Nemo. It's located more than 1,000 miles off the coast of the 3 nearest islands. This place is one of the most poorly studied on our planet. Point Nemo is used by many companies as a space garbage dump because of the long distance from land. Every year, satellites fall there. But the worst thing is that the coordinates of the fictional ancient city of R'lyeh are near Point Nemo. That city was described in the books of author H.P. Lovecraft. Among the ruins of R'lyeh, the monster Cthulhu lives. Yeah, it sounds nothing like it looks. Hey, neither do I. Hey Cthulhu, buy a vowel, will ya? Man, it's like a cat walked across the keyboard and there's your name. This is an entirely fictional creature, but many people think it could be the source of the bloop. The chances of the Megalodon winning are small because Cthulhu is a demigod. It has arms and legs, wings, and a head resembling a colossal octopus or clam with dozens of long tentacles. It's impossible to determine Cthulhu's size, but if you believe the records of writers and drawings, its size can reach up to 300 feet in height. The Megalodon is 5 times smaller at about 60 feet, or slightly less than 1 subway car. Ooh, a nice lunch for a monster shark. The shark weighs about 100 tons, like 2 tanks. The weight of Cthulhu is also unknown, but we can say with confidence that it can easily lift 2 tanks with its hands. But Cthulhu can change its size and shape at will. It can be anybody from the size of a human to the extent of a continent. Also, Cthulhu can spawn any number of limbs. But let's not stray too far into fantasy. Otherwise, Megalodon won't stand a chance to win. Let's say Cthulhu has a constant size. So, in size, Megalodon loses to its opponent. Cthulhu is an ancient wise being that is more than 1 million years old. It has secret knowledge and telepathy. Megalodon is primarily an animal that simply follows its instincts. One of the main advantages of any match is intelligence, so Cthulhu wins against the giant shark again. Lovecraft described Cthulhu sleeping for many millennia and waiting to awaken to start an apocalypse. Therefore, all people in the world are interested in a Megalodon victory. To support the shark, people send their ships to help. It's a bit unfair, but even now, Cthulhu wins. The monster can control people telepathically. It gives an order to every sailor's brain, and all the ships sail away from the battlefield. Oh, by the way, do you know what sea monsters prefer for lunch? Fish and ships! An oldie but a goodie. Meanwhile, as Cthulhu is distracted by the ships, Megalodon has a chance. There are 2 things in which the shark is superior to a demigod. The first is speed. Megalodon doesn't swim very fast, about 11 miles per hour. Athletes can run faster, but for giant Cthulhu, this is fast. Megalodon can maneuver around the green monster, and thanks to its smooth skin, slip out of the demigod's clutches. Megalodon swims behind Cthulhu and uses its second advantage, jaws. The bite of a Megalodon is considered one of the strongest among all creatures that have ever existed on Earth. Its bite force can reach up to 20 tons, 6 times stronger than a Tyrannosaurus, 60 times more powerful than an African lion's bite, and 600 times more powerful than mine. Megalodon bites its prey armed with 300 teeth. Each one is razor sharp and the size of an adult's palm. Such a jaw becomes an advantage in the fight against the bloop. One Megalodon's bite is enough to injure Cthulhu seriously. But of course, this isn't enough to defeat a demigod. Thanks to its speed, the Megalodon can inflict many attacks, but sooner or later, Cthulhu will manage to catch the shark. Cthulhu uses tentacles to grab its opponent. Megalodon is trapped and can't move. The bloop is going to pull the shark out of the water. It seems that the green monster will win the fight. But several unknown objects are approaching the place of the fight. Cthulhu is being attacked from all sides. The green monster is unique, it's one of a kind, but the Megalodon has offspring. Many sharks from all over the ocean swim to help their relatives. Now the sides are equal. Cthulhu again uses telepathy to summon people to help. Hundreds of ships sail to the fight location. It orders them to open fire on the enemies. Dozens of sharks quickly swim around Cthulhu. It's impossible to hit them and not injure the green monster. Cthulhu loses by its own mistake. It cancels the telepathic order and decides to deal with the shark squad alone. Cthulhu uses its tentacles to catch each shark one by one. But the sharks work great as a team. Once one shark is captured, the others bite the tentacle and help it escape. All Cthulhu attacks fail. It needs time to think of a new strategy. But where to retreat when there are a lot of enemies everywhere? To go back to the ancient city is to admit defeat. Cthulhu has an idea. It opens its wings and makes a single wave that, like a blast, throws all the sharks aside. The monster floats to the surface. Another wave and tsunami forms in the ocean. Cthulhu rises to the air. Black clouds accumulate, thunder rumbles, lightning strikes everywhere, and a downpour begins. Cthulhu is in the sky, directly over a group of megalodons. It has taken a short break. And now the green monster is ready for another attack. A shrill whistle sounds above Cthulhu. A satellite's falling, cutting through the storm clouds. Then another one. Cthulhu is not prepared for an attack of space debris. It dives into the water and retreats once more into the ruins of the ancient city. Megalodon wins with the last of its strength. Fortunately, such a fight will never happen. Megalodon went extinct millions of years ago. There is 0.01% chance that this shark species is still alive. This is excellent news for Megalodon fans, though. You can find a million-year-old tooth of this creature in places all over the world where people gather to hunt this artifact. Professionals and tourists sell found teeth for a lot of money or keep them as a souvenir. As for the bloop, you can play the recording on the internet and learn that this is not Cthulhu or some kind of sea monster. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, confirmed that the bloop is actually the sound of ice. When large icebergs crack and collapse, they generate powerful ultra-low frequency sounds. There are many records of famous ice earthquakes that had similarities to the bloop. Check it out! This is the deepest and most unexplored part of our planet. It's so deep that if you stick Everest in it, its peak will still be underwater. This is the Mariana Trench. It's located in the western Pacific Ocean, and its maximum known depth is 36,000 feet. And this is you, an average person who burns with interest to understand what is at the bottom. You're tired of watching documentaries about the Mariana Trench, so you decide to check it out yourself. But you have neither a special suit nor a submarine. You only have an air tank and a brick which you tied to your leg. Take a deep breath and dive in. 5 feet underwater. You don't feel anything unusual. This is the depth you might jump into a pool or swim at the beach to see exotic fish. 5 feet doesn't cause any inconvenience and you feel quite comfortable. But the brick pulls you deeper, and soon you find yourself at a depth of 32 feet. Here, you begin to feel the main problem of diving so deep. And no, it's not hungry sharks looking in your direction. It's that kraken! No, not really. The main threat is pressure. On the water surface, you felt 1 atmosphere of pressure. At a depth of 32 feet, this pressure is doubled. Now, don't worry, you're safe for now, but you may already feel discomfort in the eardrums. This is because the pressure causes the air volume in your body to compress. You'll feel this in your ears, sinuses, and lungs. But these air pockets in your body are flexible enough to withstand even more specific depth. You continue to descend. 65 feet underwater. It's already quite dark here, and the discomfort from the pressure increases. If you're not a trained diver, you begin to feel the pain in your ears. Now your lungs are reduced in volume by 3 times. If the air sacs in your lungs collapse, air bubbles will get into your blood and you may suffer an embolism or stroke. You've reached 100 feet. This is the maximum depth divers go for recreational purposes. You need to be a well-trained and experienced diver, like me, to cope with the pressures 3 times higher than usual. In addition to this, you begin to feel a new symptom, nitrogen narcosis. The air in your body is made up of 78% nitrogen and 21% oxygen. At higher pressure, nitrogen begins to have a toxic effect on your body. You feel a slight dizziness, tunnel vision, memory impairment, and unexplained cheerfulness and excitement. Narcosis can cause visual and auditory hallucinations and make the diver do strange things. For example, dancing. Yes, it might be the most peculiar dance in the world, but narcosis can cause worse consequences. The diver may think he can breathe without equipment and inhale water. To avoid this, divers use gas mixtures with higher oxygen and lower nitrogen content to reach greater depths. You're still committed to the dive and find yourself at a depth of 196 feet. Here, even regular oxygen becomes toxic. That's because you're consuming it at 7 times the pressure of what you're used to. Oxygen intoxication can cause seizures. If there are no professional divers nearby to help, you may be in big trouble. To avoid such intoxications, helium is included in diving gas mixtures. But it's not to make your voice funny. Theoretically, with helium in the tank, a diver can reach a depth of 984 feet. Hey, you've reached 702 feet. This is the world record for free diving. Herbert Niche was able to achieve this depth without special equipment in a single breath. Yeah, I know it sounds strange, but it was easier for him to reach this depth over divers, because he didn't use gas mixtures in an air tank and he didn't face narcosis. For his achievements, he received the title of the deepest man on Earth. In 2012, he reached a depth of 831 feet, but was severely injured in the process. At 831 feet, you should look around. You may encounter a submarine because they travel at this depth. But we've reached your limit. Another couple of meters and your dive will end badly. But we know people can withstand a lot more pressure. Many experiments have been conducted to find the limit of a human's dive. Using special chambers that simulate deep diving conditions, theoretically, a person can withstand a depth of 1,640 feet. But it would take a long time to reach the surface from such a depth due to the need for decompression. You see, during diving, nitrogen, helium, and other gases accumulate in your body tissues and blood under high pressure. It takes time for these gases to naturally leave your body through your lungs. If you reach the surface too quickly, these gases will form into bubbles, destroy blood vessels, and block blood flow. So divers must make stops on the way to the surface to just hang out there and simply breathe away the nitrogen. Better bring a book. Sometimes it's necessary to spend a whole month in a special decompression chamber to avoid traumatic consequences. For safe dives at great depths, you need special equipment. An atmospheric diving suit is used for long, deep-water dives up to 2,296 feet. It's like a mini submarine, which a person can wear. There's no need to worry about decompression sickness or nitrogen narcosis, because the pressure in the suit will equal 1 atmosphere at all depths. Plus, you don't even need to be an experienced diver to use this suit. but it may cause claustrophobia. Alright, so what if you want to go deeper? For this, you will need a submarine. The Triton 6600-2 is a private submarine that can reach 6,600 feet. The only disadvantage of this submarine is its price, $5.5 million. But let's assume that you have that money and you deploy your Triton 6600-2. Can I go along? Great! At its maximum depth, have you reached your destination? Actually, I'm afraid not. You have to overcome a depth 6 times deeper than that. Unfortunately, we can only reach the bottom of the Mariana Trench using drones. So, the human body can withstand enormous pressures. This is because our body is made up of 70% water. How deep can a person actually go before the pressure harms them? For a person, this depth is 22 miles. Our bones break at 24,600 pounds per square inch. This means that the depth at which our skeleton will be crushed is about 22 miles. Yeah, I think your eyeballs will pop well before that. But living organisms exist below this crush depth. The Mariana snailfish lives at a depth of about 26,000 feet. Their bodies are adapted to withstand incredibly high pressure. They chose this habitat because there are few predators and they feel safe. They can reach a length of 11 inches and weigh less than half a pound. Their diet is made up of tiny crustaceans, which crawl on the ocean floor and have lots of frustrations. Ooh, that rhymes. Let's go even deeper. We're close to the bottom of the Mariana Trench. These are cold waters where the sun's rays have never reached. But there is also life in this darkness. We just need to look very closely. Bacteria and yeast live here. This discovery surprised scientists because it was thought no living organism could survive such conditions. These microorganisms probably feed on particles of animal waste and dust that have fallen to the bottom. This discovery opened up new opportunities for scientists and motivated them to explore the depths of the oceans. Now, let's return to the surface. Wow, what a journey! After such an experience, you certainly don't want to dive again without preparation. So, to start out, practice holding your breath underwater in the bathtub, and watch out for kraken. So, a mysterious discovery was made deep in the Red Sea, the so-called death pools. Woo, that's scary. In 2020, researchers embarked on a dive into the Red Sea. The mission spot was in the Gulf of Aqaba, between Saudi Arabia and Egypt. Near the end of their expedition, as they ventured deeper into the darkening waters, they noticed some strange seaweed floating above the seafloor. They decided to use a remotely operated vehicle and investigate it. Suddenly, they discovered these strange, motionless lakes of water within the sea. These are called brine pools. They're basically pockets of salty water deep on the ocean floor. And when I say salty, I mean it. Sometimes they're up to 8 times saltier than the ocean water itself. Mysteriously, they don't mix well with the surroundings. They formed millions of years ago, sometime during the Miocene epoch, back when weird creatures roamed the earth, like me, and deeply buried mineral deposits dissolved into the water. The largest pool spans about 170,000 square feet. Meanwhile, 3 smaller ones are under 107 square feet each. At first, this discovery didn't seem that scary. But here's why they're so horrifying. Not only are they disgustingly salty, they also lack oxygen. Now hold on a sec, isn't that normal for something that's underwater? Well, it turns out the Earth's waters are full of oxygen, and at least half of this element on our planet comes from the oceans. Just like plants on land, marine plants such as phytoplankton, seaweed, and algae munch on sunlight and produce oxygen through photosynthesis. They release lots of it into the surroundings. Marine life then eats half of it, so only about a quarter of the oxygen that we breathe actually comes from the oceans. Just like us, sea creatures need this element to survive. Without it, they can't breathe and support their metabolism to live. That's why these pools are super dangerous for most of them. It's like a puddle of thick syrup for bugs. When they get in, the poor things immediately suffocate and pass away. Which is why the pools are surrounded by a graveyard of marine animals. But let's see how these things can exist in the first place. Have you ever tried making ice cubes from salty water? Spoiler, it's pretty hard. When you add salt, the water gets harder than usual to freeze, a phenomenon that has a funny name, freezing point depression. Oh, that's because salt interferes with the hydrogen bonds between water molecules. As it finally freezes, stuff like particles, dirt, or dissolved salts get pushed out to the sides. As a result, the salt's kind of squeezed out of the ice crystals and gets trapped near the edges in small bubbles or pockets. Something similar happens in the ocean when seawater starts freezing under super cold polar caps. The salt doesn't freeze with the water. Instead, it gets pushed out, forming a super salty cold liquid, the brine. And then it sinks down to the ocean floor. On a large scale, all this process also helps currents to form. Despite being so dangerous, the pools are still full of microbial life because microbes couldn't care less, they'll survive anywhere. There are literally thick mats of them in the brines. There are also some salt-loving creatures, like shrimps and eels, hovering around the pool's edges. They're being super creepy, waiting to catch unsuspecting prey that ventures too close to the toxic death pool. Ew. Well, it sounds icky, I know. But this discovery gives us some fascinating insights into how life might have originated on Earth. We already know from the evolution theory that we came from the ocean, but now scientists think that life might have begun in the deep sea in some super dark, oxygen-free places. These brine pools are like time capsules. They're one of the closest things we found to the early Earth. They can tell us the planet's history of earthquakes, floods, tsunamis, and more. For example, they have some traces of rainfall that happened over 1,000 years ago. And they can also help us search for life on other water-rich planets. For example, Mars most likely used to have huge oceans on it. Now, NASA scientists want to send a special instrument called HABIT for a special red planet mission to study things similar to our brine pools. This will tell us more about how life appears and survives in the universe. There is lots of unexplored fascinating stuff like this in the Red Sea. That's why scientists conducted the so-called Decade Expedition and spent around 5 months exploring the place. This expedition was launched by the National Center for Wildlife. They made so many remarkable discoveries that now we've got 77 new research papers. For example, they found over 10 blue holes, incredible underwater sinkholes that host unique ecosystems. They also learned that dolphins can use those blue holes to protect their young from predators. Scientists also found traces of great white sharks, a creepy community of deep-sea lanternfish living in low oxygen conditions, and even a new coral species. It's the most resilient deep-sea corals that also vibe just fine without oxygen, like microbes we mentioned. Speaking of which, research also showed us some new ancient thermal vents and large blobs of microbial formations near Fearsome Island. Now, can you believe that with all that, we only explored 5% of the ocean? It's divided into several layers based on depth. Each layer becomes darker and more isolated from sunlight as we go deeper. The places that no sunlight can reach are terrifying. Now, the fun, cute layer with dolphins and turtles is called the epipelagic or sunlight zone. It's so tiny, but even this layer is about 650 feet deep. Then we have the mesopelagic or twilight zone. It's the layer of mysterious octopus, shark, and other loners which extend to about 3,000 feet down. And then the horrors begin after this one. We encounter the bathopelagic or midnight zone. It extends to 13,000 feet below the surface, about a half of Everest above you. Here we have the famous poor blobfish, squids, and anglerfish. Below it is the abyssal zone. It extends to about 20,000 feet deep. Since there's not much sunlight or oxygen, as we mentioned, most creatures here are quite small, like tube worms and shrimp. The darkness continues until we arrive at the scariest place of the planet, the place full of trenches formed by tectonic plate movements, the Hadal Zone. It's named after Hades, the deity of the underworld in Greek mythology. Just like Hades' realm is dark, remote, and guarded, the Hadal Zone is the deepest and most depressing part of the ocean. It starts at depths of around 20,000 feet and can go down to 36,000 feet and more. The famous Mariana Trench also belongs to this zone. Only 3 people in history have ever explored these depths in person, making it one of the least explored and most mysterious places on our planet. However, despite crazy high pressure, near freezing temperatures, and complete darkness, there are still things who manage to survive here. Guys like amphipods, which are critters who feed on dead material sinking from above, and the hadal snailfish, which lives as deep as 27,000 feet. So scientists used to assume that if there's no sunlight, there wouldn't be that much oxygen around. But one day, a research team decided to measure the levels of oxygen in one of those deep zones. Surprisingly, the levels were super high. They checked the equipment thinking that it was malfunctioning, but nope, all the sensors showed the same thing. Turns out the oxygen was somehow generated by rocks. These small potato-sized rocks on the seafloor are called polymetallic nodules. They're rich in metals like copper, nickel, and cobalt, and they're basically like small batteries. When you put a battery in salt water, it can produce bubbles of gas, a process called electrolysis. In the same way, these rocks create tiny electric currents, which are powerful enough to produce the same gases, splitting water molecules into hydrogen and oxygen. It's the first time we saw oxygen being produced by some non-living minerals. This is what scientists now call dark oxygen. It turned out that about half of large marine species, or megafauna, were living just on dark oxygen alone. All these discoveries are reshaping our understanding of where and how life could evolve. It means that we might be able to find life on other planets or satellites with low oxygen conditions, like Enceladus and Europa, the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, and they have large bodies of frozen water on them. Wow! So imagine stumbling upon a creature so huge it could dwarf even the largest known marine animals today. Scientists discovered the fossils of this beast on England's coast and believe it once ruled the waves. The new species was named Ichthyotitan severnensis, but thankfully for me, scientists nicknamed it the Little Stock Monster. Its estimated lengths range from 72 to 85 feet long, almost as big as a blue whale. Megalodon can't even compare to this. It was only about 60 feet long. And what's crazy is that this fossil we found wasn't even an adult, so who knows what their actual size was. The first piece of the Little Stock Monster was discovered in 2016 in the Westbury Formation. Researchers found a 3-foot-long jaw part that belonged to an unknown species. For years, this single fragment had been driving them crazy because they had no idea what that animal was. Then, in 2020, a miracle happened, of sorts. A father with his 11-year-old daughter found the second piece of fossil on a beach. This discovery led to more findings. Finally, in 2022, the last piece of the literal jaw puzzle was found, buried along the Somerset coast. This leviathan belonged to the Shastasaurid family. Both the Little Stock Monster and other Shastasaurids had one ancestor, so all the species in this family are super similar to each other. For example, all of them were the largest marine reptiles ever to exist. Although our Little Stock Monster is much larger, most Shastasaurids could grow up to only 69 feet long, and it's possible that the Little Stock Monster, when fully grown, would reach up to 100 feet or even more. Both of their bodies were just perfect for cruising the ancient seas. These marine titans were elegant and slender, with an elongated snout. Other marine animals at the time were smaller and looked more like dolphins. Shastasaurids had long paddle-like limbs adapted for efficient swimming. Their skulls show large eye sockets, which means they had excellent vision. If you were in the ocean, no matter what time it was or where you were hiding, they could spot you. They were also incredibly fast and could dive to great depths. Of course, all these things made them the most terrifying predators. They ate pretty much everything, including fish and squid, and you if you were there. They probably captured their prey like whales, opened their huge mouths, and literally sucked the fish in. What made the Little Stock Monster especially scary is that it wins in the jaw competition. For other Shastasaurids, their jaws were a bit weaker, so they hunted smaller fish, kind of like today's orcas. They required vast amounts of food. This shows us that the Earth's Triassic oceans had rich, productive food webs. But the Little Stock Monster has this unique feature. It could open its jaw almost 90 degrees upwards. It also had tons of powerful muscles around. Its jaws were horrifyingly strong. So while others were hunting some squids, the Lilstock monster probably hunted large fish and even other marine reptiles. Fossils of Shastosaurus have been found everywhere in the world, from North America to Asia. This means that these creatures dominated and terrorized the oceans for millions of years, although even they weren't completely safe from scavengers. And that's exactly why we struggle to find these fossils now. Scavengers didn't leave any remnants of them. So, while we have some fossils of this marine family, they mostly remain a mystery for us. They lived in the oceans about 200 million years ago, in the late Triassic period. The Earth looked completely different back then. All continents were united in one Pangaea, a huge landmass. Some parts of this supercontinent were covered with lush conifer forests, while others were dry deserts and open prairies. It was before the famous Jurassic period, but there were already first pterosaurs and amphibians. It seems like those monsters were crazy resilient. The Triassic period was super unstable, but they survived through many changes in the environment. Well, until the last one. The Triassic extinction came out of nowhere. It was one of the Earth's big 5 extinction events. It wiped out almost all species on the planet, including these leviathans. It's still not clear what happened exactly, but it looks like there was a huge tectonic activity. Volcanoes in the oceans were going crazy back then. These massive volcanic eruptions have probably altered the climate and ocean chemistry, leading to the extinction of many species. Scientists have a theory that it might have happened because there was a rain of comets flying to our planet from the Oort cloud. This likely happens about every 200 million years or so. I wasn't around then, so I'm just guessing here. In any case, after the extinction, the Earth took some time to recover. Then it entered the famous Jurassic period. More terrifying sea monsters were on the way. One of them left us a colossal skull. This fossil is 150 million years old, and it also belonged to a sea beast from Jurassic times. They called it the Sea Rex. The name is very fitting. This monster could have broken a car in half with one bite. It was also discovered accidentally. A fossil enthusiast was walking along the Jurassic coast. This place is famous for having tons of ancient fossils, all because of the erosion in stormy weather. Typically, people find small spiral fossils here. However, this time, he discovered a giant sea monster fossil. Excited, he contacted scientists. They arrived at the spot right away and then had to carefully climb down a cliff to search for the rest of the skull. This fragment alone is 6.5 feet long. Turns out, it's a newly discovered species of pliosaurs, giant predators of the ancient seas. Pliosaurs were among the largest marine predators ever. Some of them grew up to 40 feet long. They used their huge teeth to snatch and devour prey, including other reptiles. Well, at least those creatures are far gone. But what about the horrors that still live in our oceans? Recently, biologists discovered the world's longest animal, the one that's still alive to this day. They found it off Australia's coast, on the Gascoyne coast, a very mysterious and unexplored place. There, underwater vehicles stumbled upon a frightening 150-foot-long siphonophore that's twice as long as many blue whales and 3 times as long as a humpback whale. Doesn't it kind of look like one of those toy string worms? But this creature isn't friendly at all. It's a string-like deep-sea predator. What's even more scary is that this isn't actually one creature. It's a colony of small clones working together as one. Basically, collective consciousness. Ooh, Borg. Together, they stretch out like a single long string in the water. This creature might be the longest siphonophore ever found, and it was discovered at a depth of around 2,000 feet. Siphonophores, similar to jellyfish, capture their prey by dangling stinging tentacles in the water. When their tentacles touch small crustaceans and fish, they get paralyzed, and then they're reeled up to the colony's body. Expeditions to Western Australia's underwater canyons were definitely worth it. Together with that siphonophore, scientists have discovered up to 30 potential new marine species. Among them were a new octopus or squid, a long-tailed sea cucumber, glass sponges, and giant hyroids, colonies of animals resembling upside-down jellyfish. None of them have been seen before in Australia. But most of them weren't as scary as the one that was recently discovered in the Gulf of Mexico. This creature is straight out of a sci-fi thriller. A 26-foot-long manga pinna squid, or bigfin squid. It was discovered near an offshore oil rig at a depth of more than 7,800 feet. It has incredibly long, elastic tentacles, which can be 15 to 20 times longer than its body. It holds them at right angles to its body, making it look even creepier, almost as if it has elbows. And yes, it's another deep-sea predator. These 10 tentacles probably help the squid trap their prey and drag it onto the seafloor. We barely know anything about this extraterrestrial-looking creature because they're very hard to find and study. And if you think their tentacles are awful, just check out these creatures with 20 arms. This thing looks like a facehugger. This new species is lurking in the frozen depths of Antarctica. Experts were searching for cryptic sea animals known as promachocrinus, or Antarctic feather stars. They're kind of similar to starfish and sea cucumbers, but have an otherworldly appearance and can live up to 6,500 feet below the surface. It's called the Antarctic strawberry feather star. Despite its pretty name, its appearance is anything but cute. It has a bizarre strawberry-like body from which 20 spindly arms branch off. Its coloring ranges from purple to dark reddish, and the arms all have different lengths and thickness. Who knows how many more of such scary creatures we'll discover in the future?